of the year. My name is Celine. I'm with USCPR, and today's topic is From Ceasefire to Total Liberation and Key Strategies for 2025. Today we're going to cover a couple of things. Hopefully our other speaker can get back on too, but we're going to cover just some information about, or just kind of what the ceasefire deal means, some history from the South Africa anti-apartheid movement and lessons we can learn and apply to our struggle today. We're going to also hear about how and why it's important for us to build and continue organizing for a people's arms embargo and thinking about specific key targets for that. And then we'll also, hopefully, if there's time, talk a little bit about divestment from Israel bonds and just some resources and next steps. So just some ground rules for the chat. Please remember, this is an anti-oppressive space. Any racism, Zionism, Islamophobia, any language like that in the chat is going to result in an automatic ejection from the event. Harassment will not be tolerated. And also, we do want to encourage you to connect with each other, but just please be mindful of the size of the event and try to use the chat only to respond to prompts or questions. If you want to follow up with a specific participant, you can reply to them privately. And if you have any questions, we really encourage you to use the Q&A feature just so that we can track the questions more easily. So instead of putting your questions in the chat, please use the Q&A feature, and that way we can directly respond to them and better be able to track them. So again, thanks everybody for joining, and we'll go ahead and get started. So, as you all know, a ceasefire agreement was reached and went into effect a few days ago. And for the first time in 470 days, the Palestinian people in Gaza were able to, return or start returning to their homes, and were free from the ground presence of the Zionist occupation and its imperialist backers. We witnessed the release of Palestinian prisoners who had been held captive in Israeli prisons. And we were reminded that the release of Palestinian prisoners was only made possible through the steadfastness, the resistance, and the resilience of our people in Gaza. And we shared in the relief and the joy that our people in Gaza felt. And we recognize that, Gaza remains liberated Palestinian land. But as we all know, the scale of devastation is immense. They're following the brutal genocide that Israel and the US carried out against our people in Gaza. We know that the Israeli occupation forces, fully backed by the US, have massacred likely over 200,000 people, have destroyed 85% of Gaza, have destroyed so much of its infrastructure, its schools, universities, its churches, its mosques, hospitals. And this was a genocide that was waged by two of the strongest nuclear military powers in the world against Palestine, a small nation of people who were under siege and occupation, and still they couldn't reach their military goals and could not defeat the Palestinian struggle. So a deal has been on the table since October 2023 for a ceasefire, which the US and Israel stalled for 15 months to be able to carry out this genocide. The Palestinian people have achieved a ceasefire that includes many of the terms they had set out to attain, and actually defeating Netanyahu's generals' plan to split Gaza in half, preventing the occupation of the Netzarim corridor and the construction of Israeli settlements in Gaza. Of course, we have to continue to organize to ensure that the ceasefire is enforced. And, through the ceasefire agreement, we're also going to see, inshallah, over 3,000 Palestinian prisoners who've been held by Israel set to be released. These are prisoners who have paid the ultimate price under torture, under medical negligence, people who've spent months to years in solitary confinement. And we also know that, and what's been exposed to us in the past 15 months is the true face of Zionism. We know that Zionism is inherently genocidal. We know that Israel continues to enact violence against Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank across historic Palestine in the region. Just a few days ago, the Israeli occupation forces launched a massive offensive in Jenin involving air raids, drone bombings. They abducted at least 90 Palestinians from Jenin refugee camp. At least 9 Palestinians have been martyred in what Netanyahu declared as the start of the Operation quote unquote Iron Wall. And we know that, Israel continues to violate the ceasefire in Lebanon, continues to murder people in Gaza. So for the past 15 months, we have been in the streets organizing and mobilizing, and now it's more important than ever that we continue to do so and that we don't let up in our organizing and the work that we've built over the past several months. And over the past over a year, Palestine has revitalized and been at the center of the struggle against imperialism. And in the face of the most well-funded militaries, the most well-funded propaganda efforts that have tried to legitimize and justify this genocide, we've seen a rise in popular consciousness. We've seen the isolation of Israel and the US on the world stage. We've seen a growth of understanding that this is a US war on Palestine as much as it is Israel's. And the exposure, again, of the true nature of Zionism. And we made Palestine unavoidable. This is what we've done by building a mass movement. And now it's critical that we continue to support the Palestinian people in Gaza and across Palestine and rebuilding Gaza and supporting their steadfastness and continue to organize to hold the genociders, the war criminals accountable. So we don't stop until all of our demands are met, until we ensure the ceasefire is maintained, we organize until total liberation and return, until the freedom for all our political prisoners, for all our prisoners, to end the siege on Gaza and an end to all military funding and support, including the importance of organizing for an arms embargo. So today we want to focus this conversation on what is required of our movement, of this Palestine solidarity movement in this next phase of organizing for Palestinian liberation. So we're going to start with hearing about some lessons from the South African anti-apartheid movement, which targeted banks, universities, and corporations that were complicit in apartheid. We'll also focus on why it's important for us to build towards a people's arms embargo and what campaigning against the corporations responsible can look like in this moment. And we'll also, hopefully if there's time, close with some discussion about divestment, but also just share some resources and next steps for everyone here. So I want to introduce our speakers for today. First, we have Abir and Nadia here with us. Abir is a Palestinian American community organizer from Brooklyn, New York. She's a steering committee member of the U.S. Campaign for Palestinian Rights. She's been organizing with Arab and Muslim communities in New York City around issues like police surveillance, the targeting of activist and immigrant communities. And Abir spent the last 5 years living in Johannesburg, South Africa, to continue her postgraduate studies and learn from leaders of the anti-apartheid struggle, as well as learning from leaders of the current Palestine Solidarity Movement. And we also have Nadia Salnous with us, who's a passionate community organizer and writer, born and raised in the Bay Area on Ohlone territory, with a focus on political education, movement building, and returning land to the people and the people returning to the land. Nadia is a longtime organizer with the Palestinian Youth Movement and currently serves as the Deputy Director of Honor the Earth, which is an Indigenous-led environmental justice organization tackling climate disaster at its root causes of settler colonialism, racial capitalism, militarism, and imperialism. So thank you both for joining us today, and I'm going to pass it to Abir first to talk to us about what we can learn from the South African anti-apartheid struggle, what is especially relevant for us in this moment as we continue to go after those who made this genocide possible, and as we enter the Trump administration, basically. So yeah, I'll pass it to you and you can take us away, and then we'll go to Nadia after.
Okay, thank you so much, Celine. And thank you everyone for being on. I'm always amazed by how many people can get on these webinars, and I'm really honored to be speaking to you all today. Like Celine said, my name is Abir Kawas. I'm going to be doing some lessons from the South Africa movement against apartheid, but I want to really honestly say that while I did mention, I have lived in South Africa for the past 5 years. I just recently moved back to the States. I was doing my postgrad studies there. That doesn't necessarily qualify me to speak about the history of South Africa. What I'm offering more today is a reflection of you all of just the history of the corporate pressures campaigns in South Africa and the movement in South Africa and how we can maybe learn from it today. So if you see my first slide, I have a picture of Ronald Reagan, Margaret Thatcher, and the inauguration from yesterday. And really here, I'm just trying to set the context for us all. Right now, we are in a moment where we're holding like these contradictory feelings, and we're in a contradictory phase. We just witnessed, like Celine mentioned, the ceasefire agreement, which we hope inshallah, is going to open immense opportunities for us to rebuild Gaza, for us to continue the work of liberation, of freeing prisoners, and undoing all of the extreme violent harm that has been done to the Palestinian people until liberation, inshallah. And at the same time, we experienced this ceasefire agreement and this like little moment of levity in the same week that we're experiencing, the inauguration of Donald Trump and the rise, just not even just the rise, because we know we've been living in a fascist state, but the blatant rise of fascism and how it is just so apparent. And we really feel like it's an uphill battle. And we ask ourselves as activists within the United States, okay, how can we succeed in this context? So firstly, I wanted to bring us back to, and I'm going to talk mainly about the period of the 1980s within South Africa, because this was one of the most successful periods of escalation, both internally in South Africa, but also globally in the supportive efforts, the international efforts of boycott, divestment, and sanction efforts to support the end of apartheid in South Africa. And this was also set at a time where you had extreme right-wing governments. You had the Reagan administration, you had the Thatcher administration, these two pillars of the West being extremely right-wing, fascist, and setting extreme right-wing, racist economic policies. And they were governments who completely did not even give an ounce of mention, or care to what was happening in South Africa, right? Just as we see we're not even dealing with administrations that are even giving you a line, which we always know is nothing, but we're dealing with people who are completely right-wing supportive of Israel at the moment. And so I just wanted to set that stage for us, because I want you to see the success that was gained during this time, even though it was a time that was embroiled in right-wing fascist states. If we can move to the next slide. I also just wanted to add one more kind of piece of context. So what I have in this slide is pictures of the Sharpeville massacre, which occurred in 1960 in South Africa, and also the Soweto risings that occurred in South Africa in 1976. Where you had masses of people killed. What I would say is these were the major shocking violent events that traveled internationally. That doesn't mean that hundreds of thousands of people did not die from the period of apartheid, which started ironically as well as 1948 until it ended between 1993 and 1994. But just in this time period, you're seeing these were some of the major images of violence. And I wanted to just show these very specifically to say that many of us are also saying to ourselves, how could we have they witnessed the genocide? If things have not moved after this completely, a stream genocide, then when are we going to move? When are we going to get wins if we didn't get the wins during, our complete genocide being live streamed? And I wanted to mention this because a lot of people actually think that it's just these moments of extreme violence or these moments, these big moments that are the things that bring change. But in the South African case, the South African struggle was a protracted struggle. The South African struggle was a struggle that lasted years. It lasted generations. It took place in different geographies. Some of the leaders who started the struggle were imprisoned for 30 or more years during the struggle. The leaders who were there at the end of the struggle were not the leaders who were there at the start of the struggle. And I think it's very important for us to think about what it means to have a protracted struggle, a victory for Palestine. That just because there's a genocide that happened, and because we feel like we witnessed the apex of, the worst things that could have happened to Palestinians, that does not mean that we will not win if we did not, get the wins that we wanted during this moment. It's not about the shock and awe moments. So I really just wanted to mention that before I kind of went into some of the corporate pressures information that I want to share with you all. So if you go to the next slide, really this is just a reflection about the 80s being one of the most strongest and successful periods of boycott, campaign, and sanction strategies globally outside of South Africa. this was a time where people mobilized all over the world, and there were huge mobilizations within the United States, and as well as the UK and many Western countries that particularly went after multinational corporations. And just like today, how we see there are multinational corporations that have major investments in South Africa, like Google, etc. These national corporations were the same way. I'm going to mention some of the corporations that were targeted at the time. You had Kodak, Polaroid, General Motors, Shell, IBM, Chase, BP, Ford. Those are just some of them. These were huge corporations, and people who were on the boards of these organizations had major stocks and investments within South Africa. And also these were corporations that traded with South Africa and maintained the apartheid regime in South Africa. The apartheid regime in South Africa would not have stayed and maintained as much as it had without the economic support. And this is very similar to Israel today, how Israel is maintained through the economic support of the United States and of all of these huge corporations that are investing money to maintain the state of Israel. So we're seeing a lot of parallels at this time. And these were campaigns that lasted years, but there was like a time, and I would like highlight the summer of 1985, where there were huge wins where these corporations were actually forced to divest from South Africa. And these were major wins for the movement against apartheid. As well, at this time, between like 1985, 1986, you had huge divestment wins that happened within universities. So you had, and if you actually, I know it's like very small if you look at the pictures, but that's like a picture of Columbia University at the time, and you had thousands of people show up to Columbia University, just as we had last year boycotting for divestment, and in universities across the country. And in between 1985 and 1986, you had huge divestment wins for universities such as Columbia University, Rutgers University, Berkeley University. And these were universities, again, that had divestments and endowments. The majority of the trustees on the boards were on the boards of these universities were getting money and had investments with the corporations that were also being boycotted through these corporate pressure campaigns at the time. So these were campaigns that won in addition to cultural campaigns, sports campaigns at the time. And we're just highlighting some of them. Like, I can't go into the entire history. I recommend for you all to watch a documentary called Have You Heard from Johannesburg? Maybe like if you actually reach out to some folks from USCPR, they may be able to help you get like some of the CDs. I think you can find it online, which goes over like the entire history of these wins. But I just wanted to highlight that there were wins, and these were corporations that people thought they would not be able to get a divestment from, that they would not be able to stop from investing in South Africa at the time, and they won. And so when we're looking at the campaigns that we're going to be mentioning after this, people, will say, I don't get why this is the target. Will this win? Are we going to be successful at this time? Will we have the same amount of momentum? And it's both highlighting that there were wins, and also these wins happened in a context that actually was not easy for those wins to happen. And this happened in a context that was years after shock and awe moments, that again was in a context of movements that engage in protracted struggles that took decades to get those wins, but eventually led to liberation and led to the end of apartheid. And like, obviously there are more things to be, there is never like an end, there's always more to be done. Once, inshallah, even when Palestine is free, there's going to be more that needs to be done to actually rebalance the injustices of what people experience there. But liberation is the starting point that we need to get to. And I just wanted to end with one last slide. I don't know how many minutes I have here, so maybe Celine or Leah or someone can write it in the chat. But the last slide that I wanted to show you all, I can't. Is this the next slide? I thought, okay, maybe I didn't. There should be a slide there. Okay, that's fine. I can't see the slide, but I will just like mention there's one more thing that I wanted to show, which was that within South Africa, while there were these huge campaigns that helped win the anti-apartheid struggle in South Africa, the struggle continued, and South Africa remains to be one of the countries that has the strongest movement for solidarity for Palestine. And it was like the children, and it was the anti-apartheid activists who continued the struggle, who then, once there was the end of apartheid in South Africa, did not just say, oh, okay, we're done, we're good. They continue to struggle for economic justice, gender justice, and there's a huge movement of support for Palestine. And there are huge boycott wins that have been won in South Africa. So I don't know, the picture isn't up, but I had a picture of the Woolworths campaign that took place in South Africa. This took place at the end. It won a few years ago, and just so you all know, like when I heard about this campaign, I heard about it before I moved to South Africa, and everybody was like, "There's a Woolworths campaign." Oh, okay, there it is. Yeah, so there's a picture of like students who were protesting against this huge store called Woolworths, who had investments in Palestine, but also had products. They had products that they were selling from Israel, and it's really interesting because when I heard about it, I was like, oh, I guess that's like some small store. And then when I actually got to South Africa, I realized that like Woolworths was like this store that was like in every single mall space, that like it was one of the biggest grocery stores that people shopped at. And also it was a grocery store that like you would categorize as a grocery store that a lot of like upper middle class people shopped at. And they were successful in getting thousands of people to stop shopping at this place. It's kind of like getting people to stop shopping at Trader Joe's. You know, like everybody kind of like, you know, it's like kind of cool and hip to shop at Trader Joe's. And just imagine if like, you know, they were targeted and like thousands of people stopped shopping and there was a win. And so I wanted to share that because I wanted to show how, you know, we're part of movements that will be fighting for the liberation of Palestine, but we're also going to continue to be part of liberation movements. And there's always going to be something to fight for. And we continue to learn from each other and gain momentum in these movements. And as you see, you know, there's that picture of Hind Hall from the protests that took place last year during this amazing rise of the student encampments. And, you know, like that was the same place where thousands of students sat in 1985 in Colombia and protested and asked for Colombia to divest from South Africa. So we continue these struggles, and I want us all to remember in this context where we feel like we're at a loss and we're not sure how to continue, and we're not sure about like whether or not these campaigns are actually successful in this context, that we need to engage in a long-term protracted struggle, and that these campaigns will, inshallah, actually get us victories. They little by little and actually huge bits by huge bits are you know, more and more increasingly making Israel an apartheid Israel a pariah state. And we will be forcing corporations to divest from Israel. We in this context that we think is just a right-wing context, we actually have huge popular support for Palestine, and we have a huge amount of people who no longer agree with their money going into investments to send arms and to kill people in Palestine. So I will end on that note. And I just, again, this is a reflection, but I hope to be able to share some resources from you all. And I think it's just, you know, an invitation to learn from these struggles and to reflect on them. We can't go over all of the details, but it's just to know that together we will win. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Abir. And I think Leah, we're doing a training on like getting involved in the Boycott Chevron campaign, and we'll be speaking a little bit more about the Shell campaign example then as well. But yeah, of course, I mean, just, you know, seeing some of the messages in the chat, the relationship between the US and South Africa was different than the US relationship to Israel. Of course, the struggles are different, and, you know, Israel's basically a military outpost for the US in the region. But I think what's important is that the main point about this being a protracted struggle and this being a long struggle, it doesn't end with a ceasefire. It actually just begins, you know, like we have a long way to go. But what our mass movement has already been able to accomplish is some concrete wins already. Like, Intel canceled the construction of a $25 billion company or in Israel. We've seen universities divest. Norway's pension fund divested $500 million. And just a few weeks ago, there was news that Israel announced a major expansion to its propaganda operations in their 2025 budget, adding an additional $150 million on top of its existing budget for consciousness warfare activities. And this is happening because international opinion has completely shifted against Israel. So, and like the director of this effort said that their campaigns, their propaganda campaigns to legitimize Israel and its actions have yielded nearly zero results and has failed at every conceivable parameter. So just to say that, there's a lot that, we have to build on, and we need to continue building on all of the efforts that we've developed over the past 15 months, especially, and consolidate our relationships to be able to really continue to advance the struggle for total liberation and return. With that, I'm going to pass it to Nadia, and thanks again, Abiyat, for going through that and reminding us of these lessons. I'll pass it to Nadia to speak about why it is especially important for us now to continue organizing for a people's arms embargo, what that means, and how we can do it, and highlighting some key corporate targets to kind of share with us what is required of us as a movement in this next phase.
Hey, salam. My name is Nadia. I am an organizer with the Palestinian Youth Movement and on steering for the Mask Off Maersk campaign. Thank you all so much for joining us tonight to talk about why arms embargo is still one of the key movement demands in this moment. Many of you may have heard of this company, but if you have not, Mask Off Maersk targets a logistics company, Maersk, which is one of the largest logistics companies on the planet. They are a Danish multinational company, and they are a key corporation that facilitates the flow of military cargo from the United States and Europe to Israel in order to facilitate genocide. Some of you may have seen our research and recent reports that named in November that Maersk was actually facilitating the flow of Oshkosh and tactical vehicles and Namer APC lightly armored tanks. Both of those were used in the massacres in Jabalia, and really notably, this report gained a lot of traction because it actually was able to map the route of these vessels from the United States through Al-Qasada, Spain, and into ports in Israel. As a result, Spain actually on November 7th denied 2 ships that were carrying these vehicles and other military cargo destined for Israel, and stopped them from docking in the port of Al-Qasada and pushed them to Tangier, which was a nightmare for Maersk because they did not want to remove and relocate these ships that had been coming in weekly to the ports in Spain to the Arabic-speaking world. And so they pushed them down to Tangier, and what we saw actually was some really impressive and kind of intense photos of what was on those ships. And the activist Ismail Zazawi, who released those photos, was then incarcerated and charged in December for 1 year in solitary confinement, which is what he is now serving under the Moroccan government. So I start with the story of Ismail because he is really representing the larger Moroccan population who is anti-normalization with the state of Israel and has very strong feelings about not just the genocide ongoing in Gaza, but also the fact that Morocco would allow its port to facilitate the flow of military cargo in order to facilitate the genocide of the Palestinian people. And so something that we are working on this month and next month is a letter writing campaign for Ismail, and we will be happy to release some of that information to all of you, because we want to make sure that Ismail understands and knows that there is a movement outside of that prison cell that supports him, and his family has said that they are very, very proud of his sacrifice and want to work with us in order to continue to support their brother and their son while he serves the sentence. I highlight this also because this was actually the first time that we have seen Spain or a European country reject military cargo on its way to Israel over the past 15 months. And actually, what we have seen from this moment was a deferral of one of those shipments. We were able, as a movement, y'all, to actually stop this shipment of military cargo. This ship from Maersk went round and round and round the Mediterranean with nowhere to stop. And so we withheld this shipment reaching Israel for 2 months, which is the most protracted timeline that we've been able to gain as a grassroots movement. Spain, as you all saw, was then investigated by the United States Federal Maritime Commission, which said, you guys cannot stop shipments coming from the United States. We have a trade agreement. But Spain was very clear. They said, actually, we have Spanish law. Spanish law has an arms embargo component very clearly. We're not allowed to actually ship weapons or military components that are being used for international crimes of humanity. And so now Spain is put in a very particular position. Are they going to go against their own national laws in order to appease the United States? Or are they going to follow their own laws and have to say no to the United States in this moment of US and Israeli genocide of the Palestinian people? So this was a win for us as a Palestine Solidarity Movement. And we today released another report, which is in the chat here. Thank you so much. And it focuses on the role of Maersk in actually facilitating the development of Israeli settlements, as well as the facilitation of goods from the Israeli settlements. So we have found that Maersk actually is facilitating the flow of economy to and from illegal settlements. And I want to say that through the work of Progressive International, PYM, and other key organizations that is part of the Maersk International Network, we've been able to actually begin local research committees in order to connect certain cities and their contracts with Maersk and make an intervention. So we know that logistics often is not seen as kind of an interesting or a major sector. We want to make an intervention to say that logistics companies are currently one of the key players in shipping weapons to Israel from the US and Europe, and that they mainly take pieces that are manufactured in the global south to the United States and Europe in order to be combined and then shipped directly to Israel to be utilized in this genocide. And one of the reasons that we chose Maersk is because we knew that if we were to go to Boeing or Raytheon or Lockheed Martin, right, these key weapons developers, and say, stop creating these weapons, they won't, because that's what they do. That's their bottom line. But making these weapons and manufacturing death, although it's their entire business model, it's actually logistics that is the beating heart of empire. That's how these things are facilitated around the world. And if we look historically, we also know that logistics played a really critical role in the French extended colonization of Algeria and Britain's relationship and extension colonization into Kashmir in India. So logistics actually has a role to play in empire and facilitation of war. And Maersk itself has been doing this for many, many decades. Maersk was one of two key logistics companies that facilitated the flow of weapons from the United States to Iraq during the American invasion of Iraq for almost 20 years. Maersk actually was key in the occupation and militarization of Iraq. And the same as well with the onslaught of Vietnam. Abir talked about South Africa. Maersk had a role to play in the colonization and apartheid, also apartheid South Africa. And so there's a really famous kind of block the boat story, actually, where Maersk is centrally involved. And I encourage us to kind of look into this, because oftentimes these big corporations, they use our streets, they use our ports, they use our city infrastructure, but we don't really know their name. And this is the benefit of such a mass campaign that we want you all to join. They're everywhere, but so are we. So we as people of conscience are actually able to make an intervention. Maybe we can't rock up to Lockheed Martin easily and make it difficult for weapons to stop their flow. Of course, we have plenty of examples where that's been done really successfully. But actually, what about Maersk trucks? What about ships? And how do we actually make sure that we're tracking which one of these shipments is carrying the things that we're looking for? Because Maersk is also so large that really weapons is a small component of their larger profit margin. They can afford to divest from this sector. And that's what we're asking them to do. So I encourage you all also to please take a look at the settlement report. We know that although there is a ceasefire in Gaza, the incursion into the West Bank has increased. And now the role is the same. Israel is stockpiling weapons for the next genocide. It is our role to make sure that it is very difficult for them to do that. And if the government will not give us an arms embargo, then we must demand it ourselves. And that's why we call it the People's Arms Embargo. Then it comes into our hands. So all of these contracts, the same weapons contracts that have existed over the past 2 years, are still being facilitated. Israel has learned from their military strategy from the past 15 months, and the war is far from over. We are demanding that Maersk drop their contracts in the settlements and drop all flow of military cargo and weaponry to the state of Israel. So you have links in the chat that are for phone banking, petitions, and we ask that you all form small local committees, even 10 of you, 5 of you, to be able to take this up. We were really successful in England. Maybe about 2 months ago, we were actually able to jam their phone lines and they shut down their whole system for the day. So this is super possible, really easy to get involved. And please do look out for more calls to action, because we will be holding mass calls to action across different university campuses and different cities in order to target Maersk contracts in a place near you. And also, if you want to get involved, there's an endorser form. So if you could drop those links again, that would be really great. And please make sure to check out the new report on settlements. We know that this is coming at about a year mark from the genocide case and the ICJ that was brought forward by South Africa and has now been signed by many other countries, including Ireland. There is a big progressive movement for Palestine that is being backed by different nation states in Europe. And it's really important for us here in North America to drive that contrast between the US and more progressive countries to say, look, we are going to make it difficult for you to continue with business as usual. You might not want to stop and stop facilitating this genocide, but actually you're going to not just be met with your people here on the ground, you'll be met with the international community as well. And that's our role to be able to drive that forward, regardless of whether there is a ceasefire in Gaza, because we know that actually the situation in Gaza, the situation in the West Bank, and also the situation across the whole Middle Eastern region is completely connected to the US's facilitation of Israel's power in the region. We have a role to play, and we're really, really excited for you all to get involved. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Nadia, both Nadia and Abir. This is really great. I think also, and yes, just all the questions in the chat about slides and links. We're going to follow up with all of them, so don't worry. Like Nadia mentioned, a lot of the links Nadia is speaking to can be found on the website as well, and letter writing materials I'm sure will be added there as well. But I think this is important, especially in this moment, because a company like Maersk is a good example of why we cannot separate the West Bank from Gaza, from 48 Palestine. You know, like these corporations that are profiting off of transporting settlement goods are profiting off of the transportation of military cargo to Israel. And it's clear we cannot separate the question of the future of the West Bank from the future of Gaza and the rest of historic Palestine, right? So we need comprehensive strategies and a clear understanding of how, Zionism and imperialism works. And these campaigns are helping us get a clearer picture of that. I also do want to highlight another important corporate target, Chevron, which acquired Noble Energy in 2020 and has become a major player in the extraction of natural gas claimed by Israel in the Eastern Mediterranean. And through their business, they've funneled over $462 million in tax revenue to Israeli government. So this is money that fuels the bombing of Gaza, the displacement of Palestinians. And additionally, Chevron gas fuels about 70% of Israel's electricity grid, which includes Israeli military bases, prisons, settlements. So there are opportunities here for mass campaigning. They have many locations across the country, and they've only been invested in the Israeli market since October of 2020, when Chevron acquired Noble Energy. So, and there have been multiple publications, including one that the New York Times reported that the assault, the genocide of Gaza could potentially slow the pace of investment in gas fields in the region. So, we can make it really clear that these investments can be potentially financially precarious and reversible. And there is an upcoming weekend of action. I think I have a slide on this, if we can show the slide. There's an upcoming weekend of action on January 31st to February 2nd that you can join. And you can attend our training on Sunday, January 26th, where we will be going through simple, impactful strategies that you can take up around Chevron campaign, a step-by-step plan on how to plan your first picket, flyering or stickering action, and just ways that different beginner groups can participate. So I think overall, just before we go into the closing here, and maybe we can see if there's any time for like a question or two, just to say that, for these campaigns, there's going to be multiple ways to get involved. We encourage you to check out these resources that we're dropping in the chat. Again, for Chevron, their upcoming days of action are January 31st to February 2nd, a training on Sunday, January 26th. For Maersk, as Nadia said, check out the website for updated materials on Ismail's case, for materials on ways to take action and the recent reports. And overall, while this ceasefire provides a moment of relief, we know that we cannot properly honor the sacrifices of all of our martyrs and all of our injured people if we stop now. So we have to continue until the siege on Gaza is lifted, until all of Palestine is free, and until the entire region is free from Zionism. I'll maybe go into some other closing materials now. We have another priority divestment target, just to highlight this. And we encourage you to also check out, if you missed it, we have a recording of our Israel bonds webinar that we had back in December. US investments in Israel bonds have funded decades of occupation, of military aggression, land theft, and genocide against Palestinians. And these are financial instruments that have been able to effectively uphold a system of genocide and apartheid. And it's our responsibility also to disrupt it. These are basically war bonds, and the sales of Israel bonds typically peak during Zionist military campaigns against Palestinians. So these are basically unrestricted loans from individuals and institutions directly to the Israeli government, including the military. So if you check out our city council organizing toolkit, which I think, again, sorry, it's a bit out of order, but there's a slide on that as well. we have a section in it on divestment from Israel bonds, which we encourage you to check out. And we are also working on developing some more materials on Break the Bonds campaigns to be able to share with you all. And I also want to encourage you to check out the South Florida Break the Bonds campaign, and just to flag that, in terms of like local campaigning, US state and local treasuries have invested $1.6 billion in Israel bonds. Florida leads them with over $100 million in investments to date. And then, we know there's also multiple universities, corporations, unions, individuals across the US who also have these investments. So just wanted to kind of name that as another key target in this moment. Let's see, I think maybe we can do a question or two. I don't know, Leah, if there's any questions in the Q&A feature that you flagged. And in the meantime, if you want to pull that up for the next 5 minutes, I can go through some resources. Okay, question. And maybe this is to either of you, Nadia or Abir. Will the ceasefire hold? And maybe there's a question about this, but maybe we can talk about what we are going to do regardless of the outcomes, and what actions should workers take if you or a loved one works at a corporation that is a BDS target, and how can we engage people who actually work in these fields and kind of bring them closer to the Palestinian struggle. Yeah, I don't know, Nadia, if you want to take that, or Abir, feel free.
I'm sure we could both answer this, but I wanted to say that we picked this up a lot actually when we talk to workers in different logistics sectors. And something that we tell them is that you deserve to work in a place that you're proud of. So you deserve to work somewhere that is not facilitating the murder of people and actually has a humanitarian focus. So we know in the case of weapons companies, a lot of the time folks don't really care. This is just from my own experience. They know really clearly where they work. But for a place like Maersk that has a diversity of kind of a portfolio, a lot of workers were really shocked to hear what we had to say. And actually, we know that Maersk has been confronted by workers, much like what happened in the Booking.com lawsuit in Europe, right? Which actually had a huge effect. Workers were writing letters to Booking.com saying, we really don't feel comfortable working in a place that facilitates the building of illegal settlements on Palestinian land and the dispossession of Palestinians. So we really encourage folks to talk to your loved ones and just to say, we want to support you, and we believe that you should work somewhere with dignity. I think often just in campaigns like this, Abir and I know have many examples, but there are these major shifts that happen where folks who are working from the inside are able to provide information in order to kind of contribute to the greater good. And that has certainly happened for the Maersk campaign, for example. We actually did have a whistleblower early on in the campaign, and that really surprised us, really helped us, and it's our role to be able to keep that person safe so that they can continue to kind of bring in food for their families. I think another good example, and I'll pass it to you, Abir, is just in terms of truckers. So we found also it's important to kind of look at the conditions, are people driving trucks? What happens to them if they're not able to deliver their load, right? What happens to their paycheck at the end of the day? That's really different than someone who might be operating in a different union or unionized labor. And so that's been something else that we've been working on, is really doing outreach to specific workers who are coming so that they feel comfortable talking to us. They feel comfortable talking about what's happening in their workplace. We know, for example, that Maersk is invested in automation of the ports. Automation is going to take away the jobs of workers. And so we know that that is shared interest between us and workers. They want to have job security. We want to make sure that it's not robots who are loading this military cargo. It's actually people who we can impact, and many other things like that. So as promised, I'll pass it to you, Abir. And of course, I have some thoughts on ceasefire, but I'll hand it to you.
Thanks so much, Nadia. I think that was a great answer. I don't want to talk about the ceasefire. I mean, I think we can all say none of us know how long the ceasefire will hold. If it will hold, we know from the past that there have been many agreements and ceasefires, and there have been many things, and yet Israel continues to transgress. And so the assumption is it will continue, and we must continue to fight for the liberation of Palestinian people, the sovereignty of Palestinian people. So that is something that we'll continue to fight for. In terms of just what people can do at work, I think just going back to what I was talking about in terms of the campaigns in the 80s. One of the things that was one of the major places that was targeted was that people would go to board meetings of corporations that had stocks and ties with South Africa. And they could just not escape being asked about this question. Every corner they turned, they were bombarded. And I think that's what we need to continue to do. We have everything on our side. We have the evidence on our side. We have, there's no way to deny the mass amount of violence that has been enacted onto the people of Palestine and the people in Gaza. And we know, we have the information of how these corporations are implicated. So I think it's really important to actually look up and target. That's why we still do have targets, because if we find the places that have the major amount of bonds that we can use to pressure them, right? So if you're part of a workplace that has economic ties, etc., to Israel, I would say continue to organize in this moment. Every single step of the way, we need to continue to disrupt every single step of the way. And that's the work that it's actually just it's on us to continually do. And I think that this moment actually allows us a time to there's a lot happening within the country, and I think that allows for more solidarity, like Nadia mentioned, to be built with labor, for us to figure out the points of solidarity so that we can continue to do our work, but also for us to take times and really plan out campaigns. We've been living through over a year of rapid response. And, as we talk about the protracted struggle, there are times where we need to be on the street and we're responding. And we were responding to a complete genocide and assault every single day and every single moment. So what this ceasefire allows, again, whether or not it holds, it allows us to have more time to plan. It allows us to have time to build campaigns, and we need to be building campaigns for the long term. That will take 4 years, 4 months. That will take the time, but we need to also have strategic campaigns. Just because they may take time does not mean that they're not strategic, and that they will not continually cause disruption and chip away at the foundation of what is allowing the Israeli apartheid state to continue on.
Thanks, Abir and Nadia. Feel free to come off mute if you want to say any final thoughts. And definitely, of course, the war is not over. I mean, Israel's is replenishing for the next genocide. There's still contracts that are being fulfilled. They're preparing to annex the West Bank. Our role is to continue to isolate and to confront Zionism in the ways that we can. So, just to maybe I can wrap up with some additional resources that I haven't yet talked about, and then if anyone again wants to say any final thoughts. But we have the City Council organizing toolkit. It has info in there about organizing around divestment at a municipal level. We have our a recent boycott Chevron BDS toolkit that just includes some more information on where to start, and just setting your goals in terms of taking up this campaign. We also have our GAIN sign up list, which is where you can sign up to get access to private organizing resources, one-on-one campaign strategy and organizing support, opportunities to network and get access to trainings. And this is kind of just a private network we have for Palestine solidarity organizers. And finally, we encourage you to check out our Stop the Genocide toolkit, which is continuously updated with any upcoming days of action and different materials you can use in your day-to-day organizing for Palestine. So thank you all for joining us. If anyone, I don't know, Abir, if you'll have any final thoughts you'd like to say, otherwise, yeah, go ahead, Nadia.
I'll just say one thing. I'm just reading the comments. I won't keep us too long, but I just do want to say that to me, the ceasefire was something that was won by the people of Gaza, by the Palestinian people, and was bolstered by people of conscience around the world. I think it's really remarkable that a ceasefire deal, the same thing that was presented in the spring, was actually won by the Palestinian people. We cannot underestimate what reprieve that has offered, even though we know very well that we should not trust those conditions. We know that Israel's ultimate goal is to expand territorially and militarily, politically into the Palestinian territories, and to continue the oppression of the Palestinian people. That's why we have to continue the work to push against Israeli occupation, apartheid, and military supremacy, and the US's hegemony as well in the region. This is why it's so critical for us to do what we do. But I want to just say, when we're seeing the people of Gaza celebrate this, and we're seeing the release of over 3,000 Palestinian political prisoners, people who have dedicated their lives to the Palestinian struggle, people who have been in prison since they were children, all of our women and young people who are serving terrible, terrible conditions, and sentences. This is a huge win. So the struggle does continue. The onslaught against our people will surely go on. But this moment is one where I think we should celebrate, and we should set our focus to say, what does it mean to not just accept ceasefire, but to say our role now is to rebuild. Our role now is to confront Zionism. Our role now is to enact a people's arms embargo. And that's the role that we have to play. We're living in a historical moment, and we have an active role in solidarity with the Palestinian people and all people around the world that are against Israeli hegemony, militarism, and oppression.
Thank you, Nadia. Those are a brilliant way to end. Remember, this was an asymmetric war where a small nation fought, again, the two of the largest nuclear military powers in the world, and we're still not defeated. So this has, our solidarity movement is an important front of the struggle. So we hope to, continue organizing alongside you all, and we'll have our next monthly webinar in February. And until then, we hope to see you in the streets and our international days of action that are coming up. So thank you all so much for joining, and please continue to circulate, share resources, and join us next time. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.